What will President Trump do to those who try to do him? Hi, I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now. And Bill, as we discuss this right now, there are hours of debate going on before a vote on the articles of impeachment in the U.S. House of Representatives. Last night, Tulsi Gabbard, who's a Democrat presidential candidate and member of Congress, proposed that President Trump be censured rather than impeached. And she insists that she's not doing this because she wants to appear more moderate or that she's counting votes in
Heaven
swing states.
forfend.
No, and she said she really tries to not think about her political career, but actually think about what the right thing to do is. And so compared to what the rest of the Democrats are calling for, censure is a relatively mild rebuke. But it made me think, Bill, of what happens in the campaign after this process is over. It looks like we're going to go to a trial in the Senate, but there will be some candidates who had vigorously called for Trump to be impeached. There are others like Tulsi Gabbard who says maybe we should censure him. How should President Trump approach these different candidate I guess the way they treated him, how will he treat them? Do you think it'll be any different for Tulsi than it will be for somebody who called for his impeachment?
No, but it's an interesting question in terms of what Trump's response can be to. There's probably 3 or 4 different options. So we'll just talk about those real quick because it's a kind of a cool question. As far as Tulsi's concerned, I think she realizes that half a loaf is better than no loaf. The censor of the president they can get immediately. It just does it in the House. It's over. And so that's a slam dunk. That's a guarantee. What's interesting about this, and has been interesting about this from the first day, in fact, from Donald Trump's election and certainly after 2018, was the realization, I don't know how many people are fully aware of this. I know most of our listeners are. But there was never a chance of having Donald Trump removed from office, barring the release of some absolutely spectacular pieces of evidence of high crimes and misdemeanors. It was never, ever going to be a chance of removing Donald Trump from office. This entire thing is just another form of mudslinging. And so now, as you point out, the Democrats are going to have to decide whether they want to sling a little bit of mud or more mud, but neither's going to stick. And if they sling more mud, it will result in an acquittal. So let's take a look at some of these options. One of the options is, I don't think this is likely, but it's possible. One of the options is the House does not have enough votes to send the articles of impeachment to the Senate.
Now, by the time people see this, that vote will have taken place.
Okay. Well, just so we know, if they do not have the votes, then Donald Trump can claim absolute victory. And furthermore, say this is how they're wasting our time, and this is why they're wasting our time. If the votes for impeachment go to the Senate, then the Senate can either take up the case and acquit Donald Trump. There's no question that's going to happen. I made a case in our right angle yesterday that there's, I think, a good case for dismissal before it even gets to a trial. Personally, I just think that's a good way to make sure this kind of frivolous nonsense doesn't happen again. In which case, if the impeachment articles go to the Senate, then Donald Trump will say, rightfully so, that either the case was so weak that it was dismissed, or in the space of a day, I was fully acquitted, as we all knew I would be because I didn't do anything wrong. Now let's talk about what these Democrats have to offer. So then the final question becomes the censure option. And I happen to think that Tulsi's right about this in a political level. Needless to say, I think she's dead wrong from a moral and factual level. But a censure is something that Donald Trump cannot escape. He cannot, if I understand it correctly, he cannot, there's no acquitting himself of a censure.
Yeah, there's no trial for censure. It's,
right.
It's a rebuke by the legislature.
Correct. So, and it comes from the House. So, the motion to censure him is a blot that will stick. It's not as big a hunk of mud, but this will stick. The other mud that they're throwing certainly will not stick, other than the fact that the mud was thrown. So, I guess if I'm a Democrat, I think at this point I'd probably take the censure, because if they don't, if they go through with this and they want that little asterisk next to his name, which will become a sea of asterisks, by the way. Every president from now on, from Donald Trump, will have an asterisk next to his name talking about how he was impeached by the party that's not in power 3 months after the person took office, or 3 days, because we want a do-over on the vote. But if they stick to the impeachment thing, Donald Trump will be able to claim absolute vindication and acquittal. And he can't do that in the case of a censure. So they have to decide which one of these things they want more. None of this is based on what they want for the country. You know, if this were
Bill, can I address that specific
Sure.
point? Because this is a recurring refrain on your part. And you would have people believe that the representatives who were elected by roughly half the people in this country are all people who do not have a shred of integrity, who are only motivated by political motives in the sense of electoral ambitions, who only do what their party does, not because they think it's the right thing, but because they've got to toe the party line in order to get reelected, and all they want to do is cling to power. Is that an accurate description of literally all Democrats in Congress for you?
Yeah, I don't think I could have put it better than that.
So let me ask you,
when you say
how
all
many
Democrats, hold
Republicans
on,
are exactly the same way?
Hold on. When you say all Democrats, I'm not saying that all Democrats are leading this charge, but until we get the vote, we're going to know how many of them have any sense of integrity. Any Democrat that doesn't vote for this is somebody who is going to pay a big price for putting his country above his party or her party, because again, there is no evidence of any wrongdoings here that warrant this kind of an action. Everybody knows it.
Can you understand how some people could look at this same evidence and legitimately think that the president did something not only wrong, but something that it justifies at least these articles of impeachment for abuse of power and obstruction of justice, and perhaps removal from office? Are you saying that every single one of them knows that that's not true, but still voted for it because all they want to do is sling some political mud and get an advantage in the election?
There is no question in my mind whatsoever, none, that the leading figures in this are in exactly that situation. They know there's nothing there. They know that this is a desperate long bomb situation, and they know that this is the only chance they have in 2020 is to keep their base fired up in the face of unelectable candidates on the Democratic platform. They also know that by making something like this impeachment thing be the center of attention, the spotlight comes off of Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and their misdeeds in Ukraine. So yes, absolutely. Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and all the rest of these leaders know exactly how thin this is. They know exactly what the risk it is.
So the rank and file members themselves are not that cognizant of what's going on, and they're just marching in lockstep with their leadership?
No, hang on. There's clearly, and I don't think this is unreasonable. In fact, I think this is inevitable. There is clearly a spectrum of belief in terms of how cynical this thing is. I have no doubt whatsoever that there are some Democratic members of the House of Representatives who really feel that this is an impeachable offense. And I have no question whatsoever that huge numbers, tens of millions of Americans also think that. But that view is predicated on the kind of cherry picking that we just saw condemned in the Horowitz report about the FBI. In other words, the very few hits that were there were recorded. Huge numbers of misses, which are exculpatory, were excluded. And if I feed you one of those lines of stories, I can get you to believe anything I want you to. This may have been the first really decent argument I made. I made it 11 years ago or something on Michael Moore dealing with Bowling for Columbine. And here's how it works. Michael Moore could go out to Malibu, and if you've ever seen pictures of Malibu, you know it's a beautiful white golden beach. And Michael Moore could sit there on the beach in Malibu and pick up a handful of sand in his greasy, fat little paws, and with a pair of tweezers and a jeweler's loop, could pull the little dark grains of sand. If you've ever been to a beach, you know that most of the grains of sand are white, but some of them are dark. He could pull all of those little dark grains of sand out and over a period of time put them in a bucket, and then he'd be able to get up in front of an audience of people and say, "This is the black beach of Malibu," and convince you that Malibu is black because this is is this actually sand from Malibu? Why, yes, it is. Yes, it is. Turns out it is, in fact, sand from Malibu. Yes, that's right. So Malibu beaches are black? Actually, no, they're white. Well, what's going on? Well, when you pick one out of 100, you can put those dots anywhere you want to. And so Michael Moore is an example of how you can lie by telling the truth. You tell such a small selective part of the truth, and you string it together with such another small selective part of the truth. And most importantly, you do not allow any of the other evidence points of those other dots, of those other grains of sand into the mix at all. Because once people realize how many exculpatory points there are for every accusatory one there is, then people will come to the same conclusion that I've come to, and that all of the Republicans in the Senate and the House have come to, and that everybody, I think, with a willingness to look at how this thing happened and why, will come to the realization that this is the biggest case of cherry picking, of sand sifting that I've ever seen in my life. There's no question that this happened in terms of the evidence that was generated for the Mueller probe and for the impeachment articles. And furthermore, the impeachment articles were basically conducted in a way that we got to find something on the guy. So let's go ahead and figure out what we can, and then we're going to take all the testimony we can, and we're going to string these things together to make what we consider to be a point of obstruction. Which, by the way, is kind of like saying you accuse your neighbor of being a child molester, and when the neighbor is determined not to release the child into police custody, you take that as evidence of his guilt. And this is the kind of witch hunt, and this is how far things have descended, because these Democratic leaders understand exactly what's going on. If this was a real offense, we would look at it the way we looked at the situation in 1973, where Republicans and Democrats both were deeply concerned of abuses of power on the part of the president. But when you don't have a single Republican, and you will certainly have some Democrats, not voting for this, that tells me that this is a giant party line maneuver dictated by a passionate, just visceral hatred of Donald Trump because he's destroying their agenda. And furthermore, it is also a political ploy for 2020 with a field of Democratic candidates that are so shockingly weak that they feel now they have to do anything to keep throwing mud at this guy. And the conclusion to all of this is they've gone ahead and ruined, again, another institution of the American government. The filibuster was one of them, but Harry Reid wanted a vote, so we destroyed that one a couple years ago. So now they've basically made impeachment a do-over vote. And here's the thing. This is the part that I simply will never, ever be able to forgive them for. This impeachment thing is so far short of the bar that it now means that in order to fight these people, we have to fight on their level. This is the Marines getting their arms chopped off on that island off of Guadalcanal. This is by the Japanese garrison. This is surrendering. This is like a Japanese soldier calling for aid from a medic, and you send 2-3 corpsmen over, and then he pulls a grenade and kills them all. This is where you have to decide: are you going to play by the rules that you think you should play by because you're an honorable person, or are you going to understand that you're dealing with people who have no sense of honor, no sense of integrity, no love for the country, nothing, none, zero. So,
Bill, I think that a lot of Americans hearing you say that would say, wait a minute, I've been a Democrat all my life. I've been voting for Democrats all my life. I'm a decent person. I've met some of my candidates for office. They seem to be decent people too. They vote in ways that I find have integrity. And you're suggesting that there is an entire party representing half the country that is completely either misguided or malevolent. And on the other side, what? We have a whole party of people who only judge righteously, who only evaluate evidence clearly.
What makes you say that? What makes you go to the second? What makes you go to the second half of that conclusion? What on earth have I said? No, what on earth? What on earth? Because this is not about the Republicans. If this was about the Republicans, there would be evidence for impeachment. We'd be discussing Donald Trump's guilt instead of his obvious innocence.
But they all have a clear-eyed view of the case, and the Democrats are all
If I were to go
wrong.
to a shopping mall tomorrow, and ask a Christmas crowd, how many of you are Democrats, and they raise their hands and say, what exactly is Donald Trump's impeachment articles for? What exactly did he do? I don't think there's one person in the entire mall that could answer that question. Not one. Maybe 1 in 10. Maybe 1 in 10 might be able to say obstruction of justice. Okay, what did he specifically obstruct? What did he do? Now, if you ask me what Richard Nixon did, I would say he authorized a break-in of the Democratic Party and then went to enormous trouble to cover it up, including lying and destruction of evidence, obstruction of justice, and all the rest. That's what Richard Nixon
after
did.
His resignation that you can say that.
Stop. If you ask me what Bill Clinton did that was generated the articles of impeachment, I would say he lied under oath on camera in front of the entire world regarding an illicit affair he had in the White House. Did I think that the affair is impeachable? No. Do I think that the perjury is impeachable? Yes. I can tell you exactly why Bill Clinton was impeached and why Richard Nixon would have been impeached if he hadn't resigned. You tell me what Donald Trump has done in order to generate this kind of a circus. Tell me
why I'm pressing this question so much, Bill, is because if you take it to that conclusion, what you've said is that half of the American public is utterly deluded because they have been voting for people who totally lack integrity, who will do things only for electoral advantage, who see plain facts in front of their eyes and deny them. No. Because they're incapable of doing so or because they've sold out to the party.
No. You got the first one right. But the idea that they see plain facts in front of their eyes is where the entire mechanism happens. There's no question that they don't see plain facts in front of their eyes, Scott. The news media doesn't report the exculpatory things. The news media doesn't do any of this stuff. The news media sits on stories that they think are bad for Democrats, and they overpromote or invent stories that are bad.
Bill, I'm not making a sweeping generalization. I'm just saying, in this case, the actual facts of the case are not disputed. It's the interpretation of the case that's disputed. And basically, you're saying that the Republicans have a clear-eyed view and are acting justly, and all of the Democrats have either their eyes are clouded or they're evil.
I am saying that there is a spectrum of inaccuracy on the part of the Democratic Party, and I'll start from the top and I'll work my way down. People like Nancy Pelosi and the rest of them are fully aware, and they have been fully aware, and they've discussed this amongst themselves. We've listened to their discussions about whether or not we can find something to impeach Donald Trump on. If you have a question that begins with, can we find something, and that's about impeachment, then you don't understand impeachment. You don't have the faintest idea of what it really is. You only know about what it is in terms of being able to reverse an election that you don't like. If you start your question by, we've got to find something, then you don't have any grounds for impeachment, because impeachment is the process of removing a president for specific crimes that have been committed and are clear to everybody, as in the case of Richard Nixon and Andrew Johnson and Bill Clinton. Now, that means that the upper level Democratic leadership absolutely is aware of this. And let's walk our way down the spectrum. There are other people who realize, well, okay, I don't like Donald Trump, but I think Donald Trump's probably done a bunch of bad things. And the Mueller report didn't find enough evidence to convict him. But he certainly said as he was leaving that there's a lot of stuff in here that I just couldn't deal with, which is, again, violation of the presumption of innocence, but they don't care about that. So then you have people like most of the Democrats, I would imagine, who feel like this is the only chance they have and that there's enough wrong with Donald Trump so that they don't feel particularly bad about this. And then going down the ladder, you end up with people who are basically hearing nothing but impeachment. I've heard nothing but how evil this man is. 92% of all press coverage or something like that negative on Donald Trump. What do you expect them to do? How do you expect them to think? If I had a chance to control the information flow that way, it would be there'd never be another Democrat elected in the country ever again.
So you're saying the legislators themselves do not have access to the information that they need to make this decision? I'm
saying that some of them don't. I'm saying that, look, everybody has access to the information. Okay, that's the amazing thing about the internet age. There's nothing secret here. There's nothing that Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer has that nobody else has. Doesn't work like that. It's a question of how much work do you want to do personally? How much work do you personally want to do to find out what's actually going on here? And it takes effort, right? It takes a lot of effort. So what is happening is you're running into a spectrum of people whose repugnance at Donald Trump is so much greater than their repugnance at the idea of impeaching a president of the United States that this is something I'm not going to dig in too deeply into. And I'm not saying that they intentionally don't dig deeply into it. I'm saying that they believe he's an evil man. And now they said they've got charges. Okay, fantastic. Now, if you're not one of those people who thinks he's an evil man, you look at what the charges are, and you realize two things. First of all, that the charges are not significant. Three things. Secondly, you realize that the charges came as a result of a direct search for something to impeach him on, which again is antithetical to the idea of impeachment. And finally, you realize that virtually all of the articles of impeachment specifics are a result of the president trying to defend himself against these unjustified attacks and this absolutely illegal, insane, immoral, un-American, unpatriotic, divisive, dirty, nasty trick on the part of the Democratic leadership. That's exactly what I'm saying. Yes. I'm not saying every voter believes that. I'm saying every voter has been led to believe that on the Democratic Party side. And what else would you expect them to think? This is why the only problem we have in America is only one. There's only one problem in this country. We don't have a budget problem. We don't have a defense problem. We don't have a Congress problem. We don't have a debt problem. We don't have any of those problems. Those problems don't exist. We have one problem in America. And our problem is that we do not have a free and unbiased press. And we have something worse than no press. If we had no press, we'd be in real trouble. But we're much, much, much worse trouble than that, because we not only don't have a press, we have a group of people who call themselves the press and who determine what the American people are going to see so that they make the right decisions when they vote. Now, if it turned out that there was no press at all, then people would simply have to figure out what was going on through searching for their own information. But that's not what happens. You get CBS and NBC and CNBC and all the rest of these guys making this case again and again and again from the day he was elected. And what do you think the American people are going to come to the conclusion of? It's a miracle. It's a miracle that half of the country is immune to this after the degree of indoctrination and poisoning of the well that we have been subjected to. But I'll tell you something else. There is an aura around this of last minute grace. I'm telling you, this is like a hole in a cloud deck. This is a God ray coming out of the sky and saying, you have one more chance to do this right. You have one more chance to do it right. And I have chosen as my messenger this unlikely character, not because of who he is, but because of what he does and because of the people who believe in him. What the people who believe in him want for the country is why I want this country to see this president succeed. I don't have any particular love for Donald Trump as a person, but I have an enormous, deep love for anybody who's got the guts and the skin to go through this kind of torment and this kind of abuse and this kind of lying and so on as a means of returning the country to the people who it belongs to. And of all the people in the world who don't need to go through this, I would put Donald Trump right at the very top. I would say he's got to be in the top 1% of 1% of people who do not need to go through this kind of a nightmare in order to give the country back to the people. He's not giving the country back to the people. The people are taking the country back through Donald Trump. And unless I see something that is a clear felony, I mean a clear impeachable offense, and we haven't seen that. We didn't see anything in the Mueller report and didn't see anything in Ukraine either, or all the rest of the 17 different times they've tried to impeach him under different means, different articles. He's insane. No. When I see some evidence, I'll tell you something, Scott. At this point now, if I see some evidence, I don't even care anymore. I don't. Because if you have dug for 2.5 years and not been able to find anything, then I guarantee you there's not a person on this earth, not one person on this earth who could go through 2.5 kind of years, 3 years of this kind of digging for dirt and not come up with something that people would finally come to the conclusion of. So the great irony here, as you pointed out many times in your questions, it's not even an irony. The tragedy is that the Democrats have destroyed the impeachment process. They have destroyed all this kind of faith in the government. They have been divisive and all this stuff from the beginning. And the part of it that is so tragic is that the poll numbers haven't moved by 1 point. The people who thought he was guilty before this thing happened thought he was guilty. The people who thought he was innocent before it happened think he's innocent. That's going to happen. He's going to be returned to office. He's not going to be removed from office. So what they have done is they have destroyed this institution in order to buy time and hope that something sticks as their Democratic candidates continue to just wallow and sink. And so once again, they've destroyed an essential part of the United States government and the ideals of the United States government and the U.S. Constitution in order to gain political power. And they are miserable low-life traitors, people like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and all the rest of them who know full well there's nothing here. Full well. Those people are traitors to the American people. They're traitors to the Constitution. They should be removed from office for violations of their oaths of office. And there's no question in my mind about that. None. There are a lot of people out there who I understand believe that he's guilty for whatever reason and that they are not really responsible for their belief because of what they've been told and how they've been told it. But the people on the top of this, up to Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and all of these things that started just a little bit after 2 a.m. on Wednesday, the first Wednesday in November of 2016, those people are miserable traitors to the entire idea of America. And that is not a term I use lightly. I don't use that term lightly at all, but I don't know what else to describe it as.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to imagine that conversation that you just listened to happening as you float in the Caribbean on your way to the Bahamas, drinking from a coconut, maybe even snorkeling and finding Nemo. That's what can happen if you join us for what we're calling Strato Cruise at BillWhittleCruise.com. You can get the details. We are going out on May 15th of 2020, and we'd like you to be with us. You can reserve your cabin for $75, and you get a little bit of time to pay for that. And you can get all the details in the link below that we'll put in the description below. But we'd like to meet you in person. And then you'll find out that, after the show, Bill towels off and is actually a perfectly civil and cheerful guy. We look forward to seeing you on the cruise.
I don't want that reputation spread around on the internet.
Oh, by the way, if you want to be a member at BillWhittle.com, just go there and click that Become a Member link. So for Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for watching.